Hey everyone, welcome to the video. This one we're going with my first look for week 16 of the NFL season on Draftkings, and that's almost a little sad to say out loud because that means we only have 2 more weeks of regular season football left. That sucks, I know, but hey, let's not think about the bad things here. Let's just look forward to week 16. It's a new slate, new week, so I am looking forward to it. Now, the purpose of this video is not for me to go too in depth on any of these players. This is just my first initial reactions to the slate. We're going to be looking at pricing. We're looking at matchups, guys that are too expensive, guys that are a little bit underpriced, and just, things like that. Just my first initial reactions to this slate. Then we'll have some more in-depth research pieces at the end of the week. So if you're watching this video near the end of the week, like on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, I probably have some updated videos that you should probably check out. But if you want to keep watching this video, you could certainly do so. And also, disclaimer, we are going to be having some Saturday content out because we have a 3-game Saturday slate, so I'm going to be doing content for that. Just means I have to double up on the videos because I'm going to be doing a lineup building video for that and a core plays video, but it's not a bad thing. I am looking forward to it because I do like doing the NFL content for you guys, and I hope you guys enjoy it as well. So just letting you guys know, I will have some Saturday videos coming out. And before we continue, if you guys could leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps me out. Really appreciate it. We got over 3K subscribers. Thank you guys very much. I really do appreciate it. I do appreciate all the support on this channel. Hopefully we can keep it growing. So again, if you're new, please hit that subscribe button. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm at ChrisPinell16. And if you're interested in the spreadsheets I build every single week for the NFL season and my Discord chat, links available in the description below for my Patreon. And we actually had a guy hit for 50K this week on DraftKings. He took down the spy on DraftKings. The single entry tournament, I think it's like a $100 single entry. He took it home for $50,000. So shout out to Anthony if he's happening to watch this video. I don't know if he is. If he's not, no biggie. But just shout out to him. And I think that's all I want to talk about. And if you're wondering where the recap video is, so when I look at the analytics for, if you have a YouTube channel, you can look at the analytics on your video. That tends to get skipped more often than not from most people. So I feel like it's a waste of time. I know some of you people probably watch it, but I feel like I'm just wasting my time going about 15 to 20 minutes talking about that. So I'd rather talk about things that more people care about just in general. But if you want to just know how my plays went, you can just look at my lineup building video, and then you can look at my core plays video, because I play all the guys I say I'm going to play. I mean, sometimes I don't use the exact lineup I do in my lineup building video, but I play all my core plays mostly, unless, injury news happens. So I'm transparent in that aspect. So you can check it out. Like off the top of my head, I had Ryan Tannehill, Kyler Murray, Deshaun Watson, Baker Mayfield. Baker sucked. The other 3 did pretty solid, especially Ryan Tannehill. For running backs, I had Chris Carson, Saquon Barkley, Patrick Laird. I liked Kenyon Drake, Christian McCaffrey. I liked him, and I don't remember the rest, but most of those guys did pretty good. Patrick Laird was pretty disappointing, but the rest did. Chris Carson and Saquon Barkley, my 2 favorite running backs of the week, they smashed. As for the wide receivers, Hopkins, AJ Brown. Chris Godwin unfortunately got hurt. He was on his way to a huge game. Chris Conley. I like Tyler Higbee at tight end. Ian Thomas. Sucked. And then some other wide receivers. Jarvis Landry sucked. But anyway, if you guys want to just look back, if you're new to the channel, have no idea if you have no idea what I do, you can check my core plays video out, and those just, if you just want to know who I liked last week. All right, so anyway, let's get into the first look for week 16. We're pretty much just going down the list here. Again, not going to be too anything in-depth research-wise. I don't have all the numbers in front of me. I usually have notes written down everywhere for when I go my core plays video. As of right now, I do not. I do have some stuff in front of me that I can go off, like Vegas totals and stuff like that. But let's just go down the quarterback list. Lamar Jackson, I think this is where I draw the line of if I'm going to play Lamar Jackson or not. If he was like 7-4, I'd have a lot of interest, but at 8K, I have a hard time paying 8K for a quarterback. I know it's going to be against Cleveland, which unfortunately I'm a Browns fan, and it really is, unfortunately. They just got killed by the Arizona Cardinals, pretty much ending their season. But, at 8K, I have a hard time paying 8K. Now, this is a 49-point over-under with the Ravens having a 7-point spread. They are on the road in Cleveland, but Lamar Jackson, like I always say, he is a video game. He cannot be stopped. He can only be contained, and it's really hard to contain him. So more likely than not, he just does whatever the heck he wants on the football field. We saw it last week versus the Jets. I believe that was on Thursday night. Where he had 5 passing touchdowns, he had 86 yards on the ground, 37 fantasy points. Guy's an absolute monster. If you want to spend up for him, it's like you're getting a running back that can throw the ball really well. So, he deserves this high price tag. This is the highest price tag he's seen all season, highest price tag we've seen for a quarterback all season. He definitely is deserving of this price tag. I just personally have a hard time paying $8K for a quarterback because we need 30-plus points. And I do think there's some solid value options at quarterback this week. So if you want to play all the way for Lamar, again, my opinion can change throughout the week, but just my first initial reaction was, I'm not paying $8K for Lamar Jackson. But you can if you want. As of right now, he seems a little bit OP. Russell Wilson versus Arizona, they're giving up the most points per game to quarterbacks. You could definitely look for Russell Wilson. Drew Brees, he had a pretty solid game in this one versus Carolina. He was 20 for 26, 2 touchdowns, 19 points. He was solid from an NFL standpoint. From a fantasy standpoint, not too exciting. Chris Carson had a monster game, though. Drew Brees versus Tennessee. It's much easier to throw on Tennessee, and I believe this game has a 51-point over-under, which is the highest on the slate, and it's only a 1-point spread. So I think this game's going to be pretty good for fantasy purposes. So Drew Brees at 6,900, he's definitely got upside. And I do prefer him at home in the Dome because he tends to play worse football on the road, but I think he'll be fine here. And like I said, Tennessee, they're much easier to throw on there. I believe they're top 5 DVOA versus the run, but versus the pass, they're bottom 5. So Drew Brees, I do have some early interest in him, but 6,900. If I'm paying all the way for quarterback, I'd rather just find a way to get up to Lamar. But yeah, I think Drew Brees is in a pretty decent spot. Titans are not good versus quarterbacks. Ryan Tannehill, he continues just to be an absolute monster, and he was in my core plays video. He ended up scoring 25 fantasy points. And I think the good times could keep rolling versus New Orleans. We have a really tight spread here at 51 over under, 1 point spread in New Orleans favors. And it's pretty hard to run the ball on New Orleans. So I could see this being an aerial attack for Ryan Tannehill and company. And he has, he's filled in very well for Marcus Mariota. I shouldn't say fill in. He took over from Marcus Mariota, and he has been outstanding. And honestly, he could have even had a better game, but he threw a pass on the goal line, and the guy caught it, dropped it, turned into an interception. So you could have been looking at 3 touchdowns here with over 30 fantasy points. So I think Ryan Tannehill, just early looks, I think he's a pretty solid option on this slate. Dak Prescott gets a really good matchup versus Philly, but I do prefer Dak at home because, Amari Cooper's got those drastic home road splits. So if he was at home, I'd have a lot of interest at 6,400, but on the road, I do have some concern. But Philly's pass defense has just been absolutely awful. And I played Philly defense this week on Draftkings, and they just let Dwayne Haskins turn into Drew Brees or something. I don't know what happened. Fortunately, they saved their day at the very end of the game where they had that touchdown. That was very nice. But, Dak Prescott versus a really bad pass defense in Philly, I could see him have some success there. Matt Ryan, not too much interest there. Kyler Murray, price came back up. Probably going to pass there. Ryan Fitzpatrick versus Cincy. Guy's a gunslinger. I could see him having a decent day here. What you're going to get from Ryan Fitzpatrick. He's going to throw the ball a ton. He had 21 points this week versus the Giants, 15 versus the Jets, 30, 25. He's been okay for fantasy purposes. Now, you've always got the downside of him being Fitztragic instead of Fitzmagic, and he just turns the ball over a bunch. But he's fine for GPPs, but not someone that's on my radar as of right now too much. Brissett, not a lot of interest there. Carson Wentz, not a lot of interest versus Dallas. Rivers versus Oakland. I don't want to talk about every single guy, but so the first thing I do with quarterbacks is, because I like to spend down when I can, I scroll all the way down, and then instead of scrolling down, I scroll up. Just because I like to start with the cheapest guys. And Andy Dalton, he is 5,200, and I played Andy Dalton, I believe, versus the Jets. I will play him at 5,200 versus the Miami Dolphins. They have the 32nd DVOA pass defense. They gave up 2 touchdowns to Eli Manning this week. I'm liking Andy Dalton at this price tag. So has he been great? No. Has he been good? No. He's not been good either. 13 points, 10 points, 6 points. Earlier in the year, he was much better. He was 25, 22, 18, 5 sucks, and 18, 14, 21, 21. Versus Miami, pretty much everyone has a good game versus Miami. They're 5 in points allowed per game to quarterbacks, about 23.1 points per game to the position. At 5,200, just get me 250 and 2, Andy Dalton. I will take it. 250 and 2. This game actually has a 45.5 point over-under in Miami's favor, so I could see the Cincinnati having to throw the ball quite a bit here. It's actually a decent-sized over-under for Bengals and Miami game, 45.5. Not a lot of defense going on here, so I think Andy Dalton's a pretty solid play at near mid price for a starting quarterback. So we're going to plug in Andy Dalton, take the savings there. And we're going to load up on some running backs and wide receivers. So let's go into the running back position this week, and it's a lot of good options, I got to say. Christian McCaffrey going up against Indianapolis. Of course, I played McCaffrey the past 2 weeks. He does not get into the end zone. I don't play McCaffrey this week. He balls out, gets 37 fantasy points. That's just how life works sometimes. Is he a good play? Yes, he's always a good play. Am I probably going to play him this week? I don't think so. But you always can. It's Christian McCaffrey. He does what he wants on the football field. He's got 40, 50 point upside every time he goes on the field. He's basically a wide receiver as well. He's a running back that plays wide receiver. If you look at his targets the past 3 games, 12, 10. There's wide receivers that wish they were getting those amount of targets. He's been amazing this season. There's nothing bad I can ever say about Christian McCaffrey. Matchup versus the Colts isn't terrible. It's not great either, but he's going to see near 30 touches every single week. So Christian McCaffrey, if you got the salary, yeah, you can play Christian McCaffrey. But a guy I have a lot of interest in this week is Chris Carson, 8,500. Now, the price did come up from 7,500 last week, but I still have interest because I'm liking the game setup here for Chris Carson. So we have a 48.5 point over under in this game, which is, I believe, second or third highest on the slate. And this game is also being played at Seattle, and they are 9.5 point favorites at home. And what do I always say about my running backs? I like when they're huge favorites at home, and that's what Chris Carson is. And I also like when my running backs get a boatload of volume, and that's what Chris Carson's going to get because Rashad Penny's out for the year. And then versus Carolina, he gets 24 carries and 2 targets. He scores twice. He gets 133 yards. It was a fantastic matchup versus Carolina. He took care of business, got 30 fantasy points. And now he gets a pretty solid matchup versus Arizona. We just saw Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt have some pretty strong days versus Arizona. And they're going to be playing with a lead if Seattle can run the ball, that's what they want to do the entire game. It would not surprise me if Chris Carson got around 30 touches in this game. I think that's very easy, 100 yards or even over 100 yards, 1 to 2 touchdowns. I believe versus Arizona earlier in the season, he had a solid game, 22 carries, 104 yards, 4 targets, 4 catches, 21 fantasy points. He was also only 5,700, but now he has to pay 8,500. But I think he's one of the safer plays this week. He's going to get the volume. He's going to get the touches. He's a good running back. He leads PFF in a lot of categories. It's a good matchup. So Chris Carson, I think he makes a lot of sense this week. I think he's very safe. Does he have the pass catching upside Chris Carson does? He is not, but he's also 1,500 cheaper. So I like Chris Carson as of right now. Saquon Barkley, he bought out for us. I'm sure most of you guys played him. He was, I believe, my cover boy for the lineup building. I said cover guy for the lineup building video. He had his best game of the season. Fortunately, he got pulled, or he could have had like 40 fantasy points. He'll be fine versus Washington. He's just not like someone that's like standing out to me too much as of right now, but I do think he's a fine option. Zeke versus Philly, I prefer the passing attack versus Philly. Derrick Henry versus New Orleans, I prefer the passing attack, although they are playing at home, so I don't mind that. But Derrick Henry's going to be fine. You know what he does. He's going to get 100, around 100 yards and get a touchdown, although he did not do that this week. Alvin Kamara, he seems a little cheap versus Tennessee. If you want to go with him, I don't mind that. I like getting Alvin Kamara in high over-under games. That's what it is. Although it didn't work versus San Francisco, but we'll see how Kamara does tonight. If Kamara does pretty good on Monday Night Football, which I don't know what he did yet because this is Sunday night. If he has a good game, I could see him being popular at 7,500. We'll see. If he has another sucky game, I could see him not being popular. So, again, that's TBT, but I think Alvin Kamara would be fine just because he's cheap and he's got that pass-catching upside. He's pretty much like McCaffrey in the pass-catching department. Leonard Fournette versus Atlanta. He had another sucky game versus Oakland in the last game. He had 7 targets, but he'll be fine versus Atlanta. I like the passing volume he gets. It's Alvin Kamara-like, honestly. 7 targets, 6, 11, 12, 7, 6, 7. He's very heavily involved. He's consistent. Now, does he have I shouldn't say the high ceiling. Does he consistently get in the 20-point range? No, but he consistently gets you at least in the 12-plus point range. I mean, if you just look at his game log, 12, 12, 15, 29, 26, those are great games. 17, 19, 20, those are okay games. 12, 12, 36, that's a ceiling game. 18, 9, 12, sputter in the last 2 games, and good matchups as well. But another okay matchup versus Atlanta. They're not that bad versus the run. I mean, last year they were awful versus the run. That's changed this season. Leonard Fournette, he's on a short list for me at 7,200. I like the price, and I like he's going to get you near 30 touches in this game, so I wouldn't hate Leonard Fournette. This game has a 46-point over-under. There are 6.5-point dogs on the road, so I could see him getting near 10 targets again. So Leonard Fournette would be fine. Nick Chubb, he destroyed Baltimore last time out, but you also got to look that they were missing some key pieces on defense. He had 20 carries, 165 yards, 3 touchdowns, 42 points, his best game of the season. If people just look at the game logs, they're going to be like, okay, Nick Chubb might just smash Baltimore. Well, I have some concerns there because I can see the Browns falling behind in this game, and then I can see Kareem Hunt being more of a factor because he's a much better pass catcher. But with Nick Chubb, you're going to get 20-plus touches. He's a really good running back, and it is easier to run on Baltimore than it is to pass. I believe they're like bottom 20 DVOA versus the run. So Nick Chubb, GPP only for me because I just cannot trust this Browns offense right now. But the one thing I can trust is Nick Chubb. But if they fall behind early, I really don't trust Freddie Kitchens maybe to get him the ball enough. But 1,600 is a good price for one of the best running backs in the NFL. Mark Ingram versus Cleveland, they just got shredded on the ground by Kenyon Drake. So I could see some people going with Mark Ingram. I just typically like to get running backs that have pass catching upside, but I'm also going to break that rule because I'm going to play a guy that doesn't really have much pass catching upside. So I guess to not sound like a hypocrite, you could play Mark Ingram for sure. It's a great matchup on the ground. We saw Kenyon Drake absolutely destroy these guys. They're 7-point favorites. Makes sense to like some Mark Ingram. Josh Jacobs versus the Chargers. It's a really good matchup on the ground versus LA. It's much easier to run on these guys. Now, the last game, the shoulder injury apparently did not matter for his volume, first from that volume standpoint, where he had 24 carries, 89 yards, didn't really do much, only 3.7 yards per carry, and it was a fantastic matchup versus Jacksonville. They bottom 3 DVOA versus the run. Only had 12 fantasy points. Had 3 targets, though, which was nice, 2 catches, but didn't really do much. But it's a great matchup on the ground versus LA, so I could have some interest in him. It's just if he doesn't score, it's really not going to be that exciting because he's really not much of a pass catcher. And really just a GPP option for me and Josh Jacobs. The guy's a fantastic running back, though, but now playing with an injury. Joe Mixon, now he's been fantastic since the past 3 games. Versus the Jets, it was a tough matchup, 17 points. Just fine. Last versus Cleveland, they sucked on the ground, 30 fantasy points. Versus New England, one of the tougher defenses, 21 points. The guy's been pretty good. Then before that, after that 7-point game, it was 17, 20, 17. He's been pretty good since week 8. So Joe Mixon versus Miami, they are like 30th DVOA versus the run. We just saw Saquon Barkley absolutely destroy these guys. I think he's a pretty interesting option this week. And if I didn't have Andy Dalton in my lineup, I'll be plugging in Joe Mixon. But I really don't want to play Andy Dalton and Joe Mixon, and then I'm going to pair him up with a wide receiver, so I don't play 3 Bengals. But I think Joe Mixon is a pretty solid play this week. James Conner, I just don't really like James Conner, to be honest. Miles Sanders had a big game. Kenyon Drake had a huge game. The Browns defense could not stop Kenyon Drake. Tougher matchup versus Seattle, but Chris McCaffrey just had a huge game on them. Kenyon Drake's a pretty good running back. He's an alright option. He also has some pass catching ability as well. But I do like Marlon Mack here. So it's basically just play your running backs versus Carolina. It's starting to feel like playing your tight ends versus Arizona. Play your running backs versus Carolina. It tends to work out. They have been getting absolutely boned on the ground. And I think Marlon Mack's a pretty good option now. I don't think he's going to have a good game versus New Orleans tomorrow night. Maybe that lowers his ownership a little bit. But I like Marlon Mack here. He tends to get around 20 touches a game. And I think he's going to have a good game on the ground here versus Carolina. As of right now, they are giving up. So I'm looking at numbers from last week. They were giving up the second most points per game to running backs. I assume once this is updated, because Kansas City didn't give up many points to the running backs versus KC, I assume Carolina is going to be giving up the most points per game to running backs, over 30 points per game. And they're also 6.5-point favorites at home. And I like my running backs being decently sized favorites at home. So we got Chris Carson, he's a big favorite at home. We got Marlon Mack, that's a big favorite at home. And both aren't really big pass catchers, but that's why I like that they're big favorites, because I think they're going to be able to run the ball as much as they want. And Carolina, you can definitely run on Carolina. They got the worst rush defense in the NFL. Marlon Mack, I think he gets 20-plus carries in this game. He did just fine versus Jacksonville week 11 before he hurt his hand. He had 14 carries, 109 yards, 1 touchdown, and limited work because he hurt his hand, had to leave the game earlier. He would have had probably near 200 yards in that game. Gets a really great matchup versus Carolina at home. I think Marlon Mack is a fantastic option this week at 6,200, so we are going to plug him in. Now, do I have some concern that both my running backs really don't catch too many passes? Yes, but I don't think they're going to have to hit value. So I like the 2 running backs we have in right now. Now we're going to go to the wide receiver position. And if you had the salary, I'm always going to say Michael Thomas is your top play. Do I have the salary? Probably not going to be able to have the salary at 9,300. But it's a good matchup versus Tennessee. You know, wide receivers just tend to eat on Tennessee. We just saw DeAndre Hopkins have a good game. We saw Tyreek Hill have a big game. We saw Mike Evans have a good game. I think Michael Thomas should have a huge game here. 30-plus points. You know what he's going to get. He leads the league in target share, market share, weighted opportunity share, targets, you name it. The volume's there. He's an elite talent. He's probably going to go off versus Indy, 9,300. He's very pricey, and I tend to not pay top dollar for wide receivers, but if I ever do, it's Michael Thomas is always in consideration. And this game also features the highest over-under on the slate, 51-point over-under, 1-point spread, so much easier to throw in Tennessee, so I could see Michael Thomas having a pretty huge game. Julio Jones, he had a very good game. He had 41 points in the last game, 20 targets, and he's been pretty lackluster before that, so it was a nice breakout game for him versus San Francisco. In San Francisco, they've been getting beat by wide receiver ones the past 2 weeks. Now, they played really great wide receivers. Yes, Michael Thomas and Julio Jones, but he had a huge game versus Jacksonville. They're not that good on defense. Yeah, Julio Jones could have a pretty good game. I just don't really see myself playing Julio Jones. Tyler Lockett, he had a bounce-back game versus versus Carolina. 9 targets, 8 catches, 120 yards, 29 points. His best game in a while. And I'm sure most of you, if you were in the fantasy playoffs, you probably sat Tyler Lockett, and I'm sure that hurt. So I apologize if you did. Well, I don't apologize because I never told you not to play him, but I feel bad for you, I should say. A.J. Brown, he is an absolute monster. I liked him a lot versus Houston. He balled out. He continues to ball out. 13 targets, 8 catches, 114 yards, 28 points. This kid's going to be good. I really think he's going to be good. A.J. Brown, I don't really have a lot of interest versus New Orleans. He's probably going to see the Marshawn Lattimore. Not probably. He is. He's going to see the Marshawn Lattimore treatment, so that sucks. But A.J. Brown's good. So I'm actually looking forward to this A.J. Brown-Marshawn Lattimore matchup. More from a fan standpoint, not a fantasy standpoint. DJ Moore versus Indy. The guy's been just rock solid all season. He was actually sucking for a while in this game, but he really stepped it up late in the game. 12 targets, 8 catches, over 100 yards, 23 fantasy points. The guy's been just solid. His worst game of the season's, I believe, 7 points versus Houston, then 8 points versus San Francisco. So he's been very solid. If you need 20 points, I think DJ Moore can do that for you versus Indy. I just think there's better spots that are a little bit cheaper. Devontae Parker continues to be one of the best wide receivers in the NFL recently. 23 points. He got hurt versus the Jets. 37, 15, 23, 11. I could just go on and on. He's a great player. Versus Cincy, they've actually been pretty stingy versus wide receiver ones. Outside wide receivers this season. But Devontae Parker's just been so good. So I obviously think he's fine. Amari Cooper, great matchup versus Philly. It's on the road, though. So we'll see. But I believe earlier in the season when they played Philly, I think he had 18 points, 5 catches on 5 targets, 106 yards. That's all right. On the road, though, Amari Cooper's got some drastic home road splits. But versus Chicago on the road, he did have 20 points. It wasn't garbage time, though. But, Philly's pass defense has just been absolutely awful. So you could definitely play Amari Cooper. Juju, no thank you, even if he's back. Kenny Golladay versus Denver, no. Keenan Allen versus Oakland, I don't think that's a terrible play, honestly. He had 10 targets last game versus Minnesota, 9 catches, 18 points. Now, I got to say, I have interest in a cheaper Los Angeles Chargers wide receiver, so I'm not going to be playing Keenan Allen, so we'll get to him in a little bit. DJ Chark, I'm hoping he's out because I have another value option. I like a wide receiver that I'm going to be talking about. Terry McLaurin, he balled out in the last game, had that really nice 75-yard touchdown versus the Eagles, 27 fantasy points. It was a good matchup versus New York. They are allowing, I believe, they're tied for second most points given up to the position. A lot of teams are tied at 41.5 points given up to the position. So Terry McLaurin is a great matchup versus the Giants. I don't know what he did earlier in the season versus New York off the top of my head, or that might have been the game he missed. Was that the game he missed versus New York? I was ready to play him in DFS, and then I think he ended up missing the game with an injury. But Terry McLaurin, he'll be fine. He's a little expensive. Zach Pascal, no, really not too much interest there. Odell's cheap, but last time he played versus Baltimore, he got absolutely shut down, and he's dealing with the injury. He did have 13 targets in this game, but really, again, it just really didn't amount to much. But the guy I want to pair with my quarterback is Tyler Boyd here at 5,800. So I always like to get some correlation in my lineup, and I think Tyler Boyd's a pretty good option. Now, the targets were there versus New England, but you'd expect him to struggle versus New England. Most wide receiver ones do. Had 7 targets, 3 catches, 5 points. That sucks, but if you look at the recent 3 weeks before that, 13, 16, 23, 2 sucked, but then earlier in the season, 14 with Dalton, 14, 25, 12, 6, 31. I think he's a great play here versus Miami. Miami is giving up they're bottom ten defense versus wide receivers. So this is a fantastic matchup for Tyler Boyd, and this is a very cheap stack that I think could definitely pop off. So I think Tyler Boyd with Andy Dalton is an excellent stack this week that does not break the bank whatsoever. Very cheap and in a good matchup as well. Then scrolling down the list here a little bit, you could play Michael Gallup. You could play Jamison Crowder in the slot versus Pittsburgh, but I don't love it. Dede Westbrook's a pretty good option versus Atlanta, but I do prefer his teammate who is much cheaper. But I think Dede is fine. But Mike Williams here at 5K, I like Mike Williams a lot. So he's a guy I've been on the past 2 weeks. I have liked him the past 2 weeks, and I said I really liked him here versus Minnesota, and I did not see him getting a lot of buzz. I didn't understand that because he's had a really good season. He's capable of the long ball, and like I said, last year he got 10 touchdowns. He was due for some positive touchdown regression, and I said it's probably going to come in bunches here at the end of the season, and that's what's happening right now. He got a touchdown versus Jacksonville. He got a touchdown versus Minnesota. It was a great matchup versus Minnesota. Had 9 targets, 4 catches, 17 fantasy points. You got to like Mike Williams here. I think he's a pretty solid option. And you're going up against Oakland. They have one of the worst pass defenses in the NFL. They're bottom half in points given up to the position. We just saw Chris Conley have a... Oh, my thing got a little blurry. Okay, so we just saw Chris Conley destroy these guys. It took a while, but he still did it. And they ended up losing the game. So Mike Williams, capable of the long ball, good air yards guy, top 10 in air yards. I think Mike Williams is a fantastic play at 5K. I don't think the price has caught up to him yet. So he's someone I'm really looking to get into my lineups for week 16 of the NFL season as of right now. So we're going to be plugging him in. He was in my first look lineup last week, and he is again. And then for the wide receiver 3, and also I know I didn't talk about a lot of running backs. We'll get to it. There's another, because we have the flex option. I always do a flex running back, so we'll get to the rest of the running backs. But as for the wide receiver 3, I'm liking Chris Conley here at 4,300. The price did not catch up. And this is just assuming DJ Chark's out. If DJ Chark's in, can't really play Conley with too much confidence. But if DJ Chark is out, I'm reading it's going to be a surprise if he comes back this season. He's a good play. Now, he had 0 the first half. He was looking like a bust because I actually pivoted off of Amendola for Chris Conley. And I was like, well, I'm stupid. I made a big mistake. Why did I do that? He ended up outscoring Danny Amendola. No, actually missed Amendola by like 1 point, but who cares? Same thing. But had 8 targets, 4 catches, got 2 touchdowns, 20 fantasy points. The guy was rocking at the end of the game. And this is a good matchup versus Atlanta. They're a bottom half team in the league versus fantasy wide receivers. So Chris Conley, 4,300. He's got some big play upside. Don't mind him whatsoever, especially with DJ Chark being out. He's full-time player. He's pretty much already a full-time player even when DJ Chark plays. I just like the uptick in targets. So Chris Conley, he would make some sense to me. So we're going to end up plugging him in. And I believe, what price is Keelan Cole? Because Keelan Cole had a pretty good game. So he's 3,600, so you can honestly look at Keelan Cole as well. He had 6 targets, 3 catches, had that nice 55-yard catch, 10.6 points. I trust Chris Conley more than I trust Keelan Cole. But if DJ Chark's out, Keelan Cole at 3,600, he's another pretty good value option at wide receiver. You could play any of these Jaguars wide receivers. I just like the matchup versus Atlanta. They should be playing from behind, so I believe there's 6.5-point dogs on the road. So any of these Jacksonville wide receivers, they're just pretty cheap if DJ Chark is out. So now at the tight end position, I don't typically do this, but I think we can spend up here. So we're going to get in Zach Ertz versus Dallas. Now, I know Aguilar might come back, but still, they are hurting at the wide receiver position. Alshon Jeffrey's out. You got Greg Ward being wide receiver 1 on this team. He's going to get you 10-plus targets, and I do like that. And I love the matchup versus Dallas. They just got shredded by Tyler Higbee. And no disrespect to Tyler Higbee. He's a very good tight end, as we just found out in recent weeks. But Zach Ertz, he's one of the best tight ends in the NFL. So I think he'd be a fantastic play here. I think he can eat up this Dallas interior defense. Interior secondary, you know what I mean? So Zach Ertz, 6,400. I don't typically spend up for tight ends, but I think we could do it in this one. So we're going to be plugging him in. And as for the rest of the tight ends, I don't think that... Well, not a lot of them were popping out to me. Mark Andrews would be fine, just because, Lamar Jackson, sometimes he throws 6 touchdowns a game, and, 1 or 2 of those could go to Mark Andrews. They have a pretty high implied team total, 49-point over-under, 7-point favorites. I wouldn't hate that. Jared Cook versus Tennessee. Tennessee's not the best team versus tight ends, and the guy's been a touchdown. Been pretty good in the touchdown department recently. 2 touchdowns and 0, but then 1, 1, 0, 1, 1. Been very solid since week 5. So Jared Cook, not a terrible option versus Tennessee. Hunter Henry versus an Oakland defense. That's just not very good. I believe, who was it? Darren Waller? No, Darren Waller was, never mind. I'm sorry. Darren Waller was going to, he's on Oakland. Never mind. Jack Doyle versus Carolina. Not too much interest there. Austin Hooper. That's what I'm saying. Like, Zach Ertz is really standing out to me just because I'm not seeing a lot of cheap tight ends I like either. Now, you could, if Greg Olsen happened to be out, you could look at Ian Thomas at 3,100 versus the Colts, who are bottom half team versus tight ends, but I'd have to assume Greg Olsen's back unless they just don't want to bring him back this season. So if he's out, you could look for Ian Thomas, and unfortunately, Tyler Higbee is not on the slate, so we can't just lock him in at a cheap price point. So Zach Ertz is, like, he just seems far and away the best tight end on this slate. I mean, Darren Waller's fine, but I like Zach Ertz a lot here. I think he'd have a pretty good big game versus Dallas. And I know one game last year versus Dallas, I think he had like 15 catches, 2 touchdowns. So I'm liking Zach Ertz here. So we're going to move to the flex option. I'm sure I'll find a cheap tight end I like this week. But as of right now, Zach Ertz is just seeming like the far and away the best play at tight end. So we're going to have to scroll down here at the flex option. I said we're going to talk about some more running backs. So one of the first things I did was I looked what Patrick Laird's price was, just because I know everyone's going to talk about Patrick Laird again. He didn't absolutely suck, but, he had 7.4 points, not terrible, but he split the snaps more than I would have liked him to with Myles Gaskin, because I was watching the DK Live app, and I just kept saying Myles Gaskin. I'm like, oh, come on, get Patrick Laird in the game. Had 12 carries, 46 yards, did not look too good. 5 targets was nice, only caught 2 of them, though. 7.4 points, not terrible. Price only came up 1, but it's a good matchup versus Cincinnati. They're giving up, like the 7th most points per game to running back, so 27 points per game. Patrick Laird, I think he's going to be fine. Can he find his way into the end zone? Yeah, he can do that, and if he does, I think he gets you about 15 fantasy points, which I will take at 4,600. I think he's a pretty solid option, but I think the guy with more upside. Now, it might be a little gross because we're going to look at the game. We're going to talk about this. So, Melvin Gordon at 5,600. He just is too cheap. Now, I know what you're thinking. He had 7 carries in this game, and yes, that's true. And I'll tell you why he only had 7 carries. So they fell behind early in this game. As you can see, they lost 10-39. He also fumbled twice. So he pretty much rode the pine for most of this game. But Melvin Gordon, they're not just going to not play him next week. He's Melvin Gordon. They owe him a lot of money. And they're just not going to not give him the ball. And before that, he was having some pretty solid games, 19, 13, 12, which, that doesn't sound great, but then 23, 25. He's going to get you about 20 touches in this game. He's involved through the air as well. He still had 7 targets in the last game. Then he had 5 targets, 3 targets, 5. He's involved in the passing game as well. And this is a good matchup versus Oakland. And he's just too cheap. I mean, 5,600 for Melvin Gordon. I'm just going to take the discount there. I'm going to buy the dip. In Oakland, they are a bottom half team when it comes to fantasy running backs. Now, I know they did pretty good versus Leonard Fournette in this game, in the game last night, or whenever you're watching this video. But 5,600, I'll take it. A guy with pass catching upside as well, 20 plus touch upside, and they are favorites. They are 6.5 point favorites at home here, so I'm liking it. And they also play at 4 o'clock, so you get the late game as well. So I think Melvin Gordon's a pretty solid play, 5,600. And then we get 3K defense, which is nice because I honestly hate all the defenses this week. I don't like any of them. The Steelers would be fine versus the Jets, but the Broncos would be fine. But I don't like any defense this week. I don't like any of the cheap defenses this week, so I'm not playing anyone versus Lamar Jackson. I'm not going to play anyone versus Seattle. I'm playing one versus Drew Brees. I mean, Jaguars at 2,200 might be the way to go if you're going to spend all the way down. But as of right now, we're just going to plug in our 3K defense, and that's going to be the Jets versus Pittsburgh. And I just saw Duck Hodges throw like 3 or 4 interceptions, so I think the Jets can get the job done here. Now, are they a good defense? No, but they're also at home, and this game features a 30.5 point over-under, which is second lowest on the entire slate. So I do like getting defenses on low totals, and that's what the Jets are. And the Jets are 3-point dogs here, so I don't think Pittsburgh's going to put up too many points. They have one of the best run defenses in the league. Hopefully they can stop James Conner. And I think this is a pretty solid first look. So we got Andy Dalton. He's just too cheap going against Miami. We got Chris Carson going up against Arizona. We got Marlon Mack going up against Carolina. These are 2 elite matchups. Both running backs should get 20-plus carries on the ground. Tyler Boyd, we're going to pair him up with Andy Dalton. It's a fantastic matchup through the air. They're 32nd DVOA versus the pass. Mike Williams, he seems too cheap, and I think he can pop off again versus Oakland. Chris Conley, assuming DJ Chark is out, he's still a little bit too cheap. Zach Ertz, I think he's far and away the best tight end on this slate, and he's pretty easy to fit in, as you can see, as long as you spend down for a quarterback. Melvin Gordon, he's too cheap this week, sub 6K for Melvin Gordon. I would take that all day. Then the Jets defense, they're 3K, and they fit at the end. So anyway, guys, that's going to be a first look. I hope this video was helpful. If it was, remember to leave a like. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. Really helps me out. Really appreciate it. I need to get to bed. As you can see, my eyes can barely stay awake at this point. So see you guys in the next video, and hope you had a great main slate.